Hey everybody, my name is Angie Atkinson and I'm a certified life coach and author and a survivor. Today at queenbeing.com we are going to discuss clinical depression and what the difference is between that and sadness in relation to narcissistic abuse recovery and PTSD. Let's get started. All right, so when you're dealing with a narcissistic abuser in a toxic relationship, you're going to experience all kinds of PTSD. PTSD related symptoms, including dissociation, anxiety, various physical symptoms, and a whole lot more, right? But one of the easiest symptoms you can miss when you're dealing with this is depression, okay? And the reason that it's so easy is because, sure, everybody gets depressed now and then, but there are certain warning signs that you have to watch for because what it comes down to is that a lot of times it's easy to hide depression and it's also easy to, kind of get to that place where you're just simply not really living your life, right? And this is especially true when you're trying to heal after a toxic relationship or even while you're trying to find the strength to to leave one of those relationships, right? Okay. So, you know, obviously depression's tough because it can debilitate you, right? And because it's easy for people to miss and because maybe you're just going to be a little quieter than usual as far as people from the outside can tell. Or maybe you're going to be a little bit more withdrawn or, whatever. And after having survived the abuse you have, anyone in your life who even knows you is going to think, well, it's normal for her to be a little sad or for him to be a little sad. They've just been through living hell, and nobody else would be aware or able to tell, probably, if they're not directly connected to you. So, you know, sure, it can be normal sometimes, absolutely, but sometimes you've got a case of clinical depression, and that can be devastating to your life, and of course to your narcissistic abuse recovery, right? So let's talk about narcissists and how they directly affect your depression. All right, so most of the time, a narcissist is going to do everything in his power or her power to maintain some level of control over you. We all know this. So if you go into a depression, this gives them an opportunity to twist the screws in a little tighter. Okay, so rather than helping you through it, they're going to put their proverbial foot on top of your proverbial head and spit on you as you try to climb out of the depths of hell. That's why if you're currently dealing with a narc in your life, you might want to consider working toward going no contact or at least low contact because honestly, your life could depend on it if you're not able to get past that depression stuff, right? So let's talk about this. How is clinical depression different than sadness? Well, it's normal to feel sad when you're faced with stressful or emotional situations, no matter who you are, no matter who you're involved with. But how can you distinguish, especially when you're involved with a narcissist, how can you distinguish feelings of sadness from clinical depression symptoms? Okay. Well, the answer is kind of complex, but I'm going to fill you in here. Okay. Let's start here. Sadness or the blues, quote unquote, the blues, might disappear soon after the onset, like within a few days. So you might go through a monthly depression or you might have an occasional bout with depression. That's normal and that's okay and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it in either case except that you need to help yourself if you're beyond a typical just bout of the blues, right? So clinical depression is usually going to last 2 weeks or longer. That's the first symptom you need to look for. And it's going to cause noticeable changes in your lifestyle, right? So during periods of stressful situations, times when you're really sad, you might be able to pull yourself out of the mood by talking to a trusted friend or getting away for a while, or maybe, just taking better care of yourself. So, clinical depression is going to be signified by feeling like you're just in a huge abyss of just black death. I mean, not death, but, pain and suffering and horrible stuff. And you just feel like no matter what you do, you can't climb out of it. Now, this is an ongoing situation, and of course, it can manifest in a number of ways, right? So, for example, a lot of my coaching clients tell me that they just go numb after a while, okay, because they're so put upon by the narcissist in their lives. They're so beat down emotionally by the narcissist in their lives that they just give up, right? They find themselves, with a bit of social anxiety, and they find that they'd rather be alone a lot of the time. They can't deal with social situations because they feel incredibly overwhelmed by both their own emotions and the idea of having to handle one more problem from one more person. Now, sometimes it's just a matter of people, just decide that you know, they just want to talk to you about whatever's going on in their life. And sometimes when you're dealing with this type of abuse and this type of depression, it just feels so overwhelming that you can't stand the idea of having to help someone else get through something else. You see what I mean? All right. Anyway, what it comes down to is that it often feels like it just might be that straw that breaks the camel's back, you know? So if you're in that boat, you might find yourself becoming upset when your friends or your family attempt to cheer you up or reach out to you in some way. And you might feel that you might find that you have feelings of being irritable or stomach problems, changes in sleep patterns, or even an inability to cope with the most menial tasks or dilemmas, right? And unfortunately, you can't always pinpoint like a really logical reason, even though somebody from the outside might be able to go, well, of course you're being abused emotionally, of course you're depressed, of course you are. But when you're on the inside of it, first of all, you probably sometimes don't even realize you're being abused, and sometimes you minimize that in your mind because you're not being physically abused, or they're dancing right along the line of what you consider your deal breakers. Anyway, clinical depression might mean that you have thoughts of death or suicide. Okay, that's a big important thing. And that you might feel like life just isn't worth living anymore, or that you're completely worthless, or that you don't deserve anything good. And, let's talk really quickly the difference between men and women when it comes to clinical depression related to narcissistic abuse, okay? Women who experience these symptoms usually won't have quite as tough a time as reaching out for help as the men will, because men often will consider it a sign of weakness to admit that they're depressed. And men, you may lose perspective and attempt to live with these symptoms, which are so debilitating, rather than asking for help. And the thing that you need to understand is that you can't technically work through clinical depression without help. So if you feel like you're clinically depressed, you've got to do something about it, okay? So, women, same goes for you, okay? Let's talk about this. The easiest way to detect depression in yourself, okay? So, the most solid way that you can kind of get a clarification between the differences in sadness and clinical depression is understanding first that sadness is fleeting, like I said. It won't last more than a few days usually, and the symptoms and the feelings will usually disappear after you deal with whatever the problem is that's causing the distress. Now, this is why when you're going through narcissistic abuse and narcissistic abuse recovery, so often you're still dealing with the narcissist in some capacity, and so regardless of what you do to deal with it, you're still always in distress because the narcissist makes sure of it. So it's hard. It's hard to get through it, but this is why you have to educate yourself, discover that you're depressed, understand how to deal with it, and then begin to deal with it. So this is what this series is about, okay? Anyway, so you go on living with sadness. You work every day. You deal with the lingering thoughts that are causing the blues, right? But how is that going to help you? It doesn't help. It just makes your life harder. But the thing is that clinical depression will persist until your life becomes a living hell. People who are well-meaning, friends and family, you know what? They might be like, "Hey, girl, snap out of it," or "Hey, dude, get over it," But you just can't make that transition no matter how hard you try. And so when some people find that they, turning to drugs and alcohol, let me just go out for the night and get drunk, whatever, will help them feel better, or other medications, even for just a little bit of time. But the fact is that going that way, obviously, as you already know, can harm you or seriously affect the rest of your life in a negative way. So before we wrap this section up, I want to talk about one more possible cause of depression for you, your clinical depression, and that could be the prescription drugs that a medical condition might be having you. You might be taking prescription drugs for a medical condition, and sometimes those can cause clinical depression alone, simply because the way they chemically change your body's makeup. So if you suspect that prescription medications could be causing the problem, then you should definitely talk to your doctor about it, about changing the dosage or the type of prescription you're on. They can usually make adjustments for you, okay, or at least maybe even combat it with another med, although I don't highly recommend that. Bottom line, though, if you've tried everything to make your depression go away and you still feel locked into that emotional roller coaster of sadness and despair, you might have clinical depression. And this can be treated with a number of options that, of course, you can discuss with your doctor. So, if that's the case, I want to, or if you're not sure, let's just kind of go over, understanding the symptoms of depression and what you're dealing with, okay? So, let me start here with you. Are those hopeless, exhausted, and sad feelings that you're experiencing or that you have experienced signs of depression, or are they just the blues? Are they lasting longer than usual? Okay, like I said, understanding the symptoms of depression are going to be able to clue you in to whether you're just having a typical downtime, or like you're, oh, I'm sad, I can't handle it for a minute, or if you need to go see a doctor and get some treatment for depression. Okay, so by taking the time to understand these symptoms, understanding and being able to recognize the symptoms of depression and knowing how it's affecting you, you really can get out of it faster. Okay, and get back to the life that you need to be living and the life that you want to be living. And maybe you're still manifesting that, but it does, staying in this pattern of being sad and depressed and overwhelmed and lonely, honey, that's not going to help you. Okay, you have to understand that knowing the symptoms of depression, understanding them, is the first step that you're going to need to take care of this, debilitating problem that seriously can affect anyone sooner or later, right? But in your case, because you're also dealing with narcissistic abuse recovery, it's a whole other ball of wax. Okay, so the first thing you need to know is that life's challenges are sometimes enough to make you feel sad and disappointment, and that's pretty normal. Okay, those feelings alone are not considered depression. When we're talking about a full-blown depression, we're talking about a lot more than that. Okay, when symptoms of depression overwhelm your life so that you really can't do the things you need to do normally, like work, eat, sleep, and those times that you're finding yourself barely functioning throughout the day, depression could be the reason that you're stopping, and this could be the thing that's keeping you stuck in your recovery, right? So let's talk about some of the symptoms that could be a red flag for clinical depression, okay? So first, thoughts that life is just not worth living that turn into thoughts of ending your life. Another one, feelings of hating yourself, self-loathing, and worthlessness that bring on guilt and sadness. This is such a common thing for victims and survivors of narcissists because they have so often beat it into our heads that we aren't worth any better. We don't deserve any more. We're not worth much at all according to them. We know better, but sometimes we forget when we're constantly in the middle of it, right? Okay. So, another one, lack of concentration for even the most menial tasks. If you have trouble getting stuff done, honey, you could be depressed, especially if normally in your life you have been able to get things done, okay? But even if not, maybe you've been depressed a long time, right? So this is something to consider. All right, so let's talk about another one. Insomnia that brings on, being tired all the time or sleeping too much. Um, you know, I have personally experienced insomnia during almost every depression in my life, and what has happened to me is because, essentially my head won't stop going. I keep thinking and hearing and thinking and hearing, and it's very hard to sleep with that. And so, for me, I cope with that by listening to something while I sleep, whether it's just some old sitcom on TV or, soothing music, something like that, whatever it is, to just keep my head off of whatever it is that's bothering me that night, right? But again, if you're dealing with a clinical depression, your coping tactics are only going to work to get you through. Once you've coped with it as much as you can to keep functioning, you still have to deal with the root of the issue, and sometimes that does require medical intervention. So please don't ever feel like you're weak or you're less than if you choose to get some help with any of your problems, because the fact is, in my opinion, the first step, besides understanding and acknowledging and doing something, being proactive is something that will absolutely change your life in every way if you choose to do it, okay? Being tired, that's another one. Constantly tired. Irritability, with others, or extreme anger. Now, this is an interesting one because a lot of times when you're depressed, you wouldn't think that you would have anger and be able to reach out into this stuff, right? But, when you focus on, when you look at it and you think about it, do you find yourself kind of snapping at people and kind of just being really, really angry? These are the things that you need to think about, okay? Loss of appetite or binge eating that leads to weight gain or weight loss. Personally, 9 times out of 10, I will gain weight and not lose weight when I'm depressed. But there have been a couple of really serious times in my life when I couldn't even eat, and that's very unlike me. But if I could do that, if I could get to that place, then I knew that it was really bad. Like I said, literally twice in my life. Okay. Physical problems such as headaches, stomach aches, or other chronic pain problems. Depression can affect you whether you're young or old. Nobody's immune to it, is what I'm trying to say. Men and women, successful people, and those who have lost almost everything. This particular, you know, debilitation, it, it literally it literally has no limits. It has no demographic. Okay, it can be from the youngest person to the oldest person, men, women, poor, rich, doesn't matter. Has no issue. Okay. So another thing to think about, you know, the symptoms will sometimes appear differently in men and women, or different in teenagers and children. You know, so age matters. Seniors often have a problem with depression after they've lost a spouse, or had a major life change like moving into a nursing home. So if someone in your life is in that case, or you're in that case, you just need to keep your eyes open and see what's happening, right? There are so many different types of depression, and they can cause so many different types of symptoms. So, for example, maybe a mild depression comes in the form of feeling slightly depressed, and it goes away very quickly and your normal mood may return. But mild depression can return again, and it can sometimes last for years. A lot of times mild depression goes undetected and cause problems, and it can cause problems in your lifestyle, but you don't know exactly why you're having those problems, right? Major depression is usually caused by other things. It's usually accompanied by, a complete inability to find any pleasure in your life. So, if a bout with major depression is happening and the symptoms are left untreated, dude, it can last for months. And if you think about it, when you're having symptoms that surpass the normal blues or the regular, I'm just sad today or whatever, you got to do treat. You have to immediately seek treatment, okay? Because it could really, really, literally cost you your life, okay? Not just because of, because you might accidentally, nobody accidentally commits suicide, right? But if you're in that place where you are feeling devastated and alone in the world and nothing is working out your way, you really might find that it's not worth going on. Or you might stop feeding yourself, or you might stop taking care of yourself, or you might just say, you know what, so what if I'm allergic to peanut butter? I'm going to eat it anyway. Whatever. When you're depressed, your judgment isn't in its usual state of being. You're not in your usual state of being. You might make bad choices for yourself, your life, your future. If you're depressed or you've been depressed before, I'd love to hear from you. Okay. How did you deal with it if you had clinical depression? Did you take medicine? What did you do? Personally, when I left my ex-narcissist, I went through a very, very big depression. I had to go to my doctor, and I started with Paxil, I think, ended up on Prozac. Was on Prozac for 6 months. At the end of the 6 months, I realized that I was having no emotions anymore, and I wasn't really, really excited about anything or really, really sad about anything. So I went to my doctor. My doctor weaned me off of it. But the thing is that for the period of time that I needed it, that medicine helped me. It saved my life in a lot of ways, not because I was suicidal. I certainly wasn't. But I was depressed, I was sad, I was feeling like I couldn't get through it. And sometimes when you're having such a difficult transition in your life as leaving a narcissist and starting all over by yourself, and in my case, I was a single mother of a 1-year-old, and I had no idea what I was going to do. And so, anxiety, depression, stress, all of these things were happening to me. And so when I went to my doctor and I said I need a little support, the doctor, put me on medicine. It got me through. And at the end of the time, I weaned off the medicine and life was okay. So, if you have to do that, don't feel bad. Everybody goes through something. Give yourself a break. Take care of yourself. Love yourself enough to help yourself here. Okay? All right, you guys, this is it for today. Have a wonderful week. And as always, if you have questions or you need information about narcissism and narcissistic abuse recovery, you can visit queenbeing.com. If you're looking for help with personal coaching, or you'd like to check out my free 5-day email course, you can visit narcissismsupportcoach.com. Or if you have questions, comments, concerns, things you want to talk about, or you want to read my books, booksangiewrote.com. By the way, next week I'll be doing a series on how to overcome depression during your narcissistic abuse recovery. So today we have made the discovery and we have worked toward understanding it. Next week we're going to overcome it. All right? See you soon. Bye-bye.